What's the most insane meltdown you've witnessed at a public library? Standing in the children's section of the public library with Sergeant Scales draped around my neck like the world's scaliest scarf was definitely a choice. But my niece Miley had specifically requested her favorite reading buddy for her birthday story time, and I wasn't about to disappoint a 6-year-old. My sister Lorelai's head snapped toward me from across the circle of cross-legged kindergartners, her eyes widening with the kind of horror usually reserved for finding spiders in your cereal. She mouthed, "Absolutely not," while making slashing motions across her throat, but Sergeant Scales just lazily flicked his tongue and settled more comfortably against my collarbone. The whole situation started 8 months ago, when I inherited Sergeant Scales from my elderly neighbor after she moved into assisted living. She'd knocked on my door holding this gorgeous bearded dragon in a travel carrier, explaining that her new facility didn't allow pets, and she'd noticed I worked from home. "His name is Sergeant Scales because he was my husband's," she'd said, tearing up slightly. Odin was a drill sergeant who said this lizard had better posture than most of his recruits. I couldn't say no to a crying old lady, so suddenly I was the owner of a bearded dragon. Miley discovered Sergeant Scales during a family dinner when she'd wandered into my home office and found him basking under his heat lamp. Instead of screaming like her mother would have, she'd pressed her tiny nose against the glass and whispered, "He looks like a tiny dragon king." From then on, every visit involved lengthy conversations where Miley would read picture books to Sergeant Scales while he sat perfectly still, occasionally tilting his head like he was deeply invested in the plot of the Rainbow Fish. I started bringing him to her library story times in a small carrier because she insisted he helped her be brave about reading out loud. Everything unraveled the moment Lorelai noticed Sergeant Scales wasn't in his carrier, but was instead lounging across my shoulders like he owned the library. She speed-walked through the circle of children, stepping on at least 3 copies of The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and hissed that I was exposing innocent children to salmonella, exotic diseases, and psychological trauma. "That thing is sending satanic messages through its head bobbing," she whisper-screamed, somehow managing to make it echo through the entire library. "Look at how it's blinking. That's Morse code. It's probably coordinating an attack on my son specifically." Her son, my nephew Denver, was busy picking his nose and hadn't even noticed the lizard. Lorelai's voice climbed higher as she accused me of training Sergeant Scales to target Denver because I was jealous that her child could already read at a 3rd grade level, while ignoring that Denver was currently trying to eat a crayon. She grabbed a nearby librarian, demanding they call animal control, the health department, and possibly the FBI because reptiles don't belong near literature, and she was certain there were federal regulations about this exact situation. The other parents started murmuring, some pulling their children closer. "This is biological warfare," Lorelai announced to the room, her voice reaching frequencies only dogs and apparently bearded dragons could hear. "My sister has weaponized a lizard because she can't have children of her own and wants to traumatize ours with her scaled substitute baby." She pointed at Sergeant Scales, who had fallen asleep on my shoulder, his tiny beard puffing with each breath. "It's probably carrying the plague, or bird flu." "Do lizards get bird flu?" "They must. Everything gets bird flu now. And Ebola. Definitely lizard Ebola." She turned to the growing crowd, explaining how I'd always been unstable, citing the time in high school when I dyed my hair purple as evidence of my lifelong pattern of attention-seeking behavior. The head children's librarian, Mrs. Grant, stood up slowly from behind her desk, walked over to us with a measured pace of someone who'd dealt with worse, and cleared her throat. "Ma'am," she said to Lorelai in the same voice she used for story time, "I need to show you something." She led us to the wall near the reading nook where dozens of photographs were displayed in colorful frames. Each photo showed Sergeant Scales with different children, some reading to him, others just sitting nearby while he sunbathed in his portable basking spot. A small plaque read, "Sergeant Scales, official reading buddy, over 500 books shared." Mrs. Grant explained that Sergeant Scales had been coming to the library for 3 years, was registered with the county as a literacy therapy animal, and had his own library card with more checkouts than most adults. She pulled out a binder filled with thank you letters from parents whose children had overcome reading anxiety by practicing with the dragon who never judges. Lorelai stood there like a statue as she watched Miley run over to hug my leg and said, "Sergeant Scales is famous." Lorelai slunk toward the exit, muttering something about needing to verify this with her lawyer, who I'm pretty sure doesn't exist.